All right, for the second part of the tutorial, we're going to be combining type and image. So you can be combining type with an object that you've close tooled, and you're going to do that in Illustrator, and then you're going to take some vectors, bring them into Photoshop, and combine them with another image that you've close tooled, but this time in Photoshop. All right, so for the first one, I'm just going to start here. I'm going to place object that I close tooled earlier in the semester in exercise 6. I'm just going to place that here. It's quite a bit larger, and what I can do here in order to resize it easily is I can just take this grid object, this guide, and here I can see that it's 26p6, so 26 picas and 6 points. I can copy that, and I can take and then just select the image that I placed, change the reference point, and all I'm going to do is, so long as I'm maintaining the width and the height, so long as those two things are constrained, I can just paste the width in there and it'll resize it for me. And that'll give me a good start. It'll help me to get the size approximate that I want here. And all I want you to do with this one is to practice taking your type and putting it into an unusual shape, a non-standard shape, so non-square. So I'm going to just take this object and I'm going to place it about here, and I'm just going to crop it. So I'm going to crop it. I'm going to take this guide here, and I'm going to release it. And I'm going to move it to the front. And you can't see it anymore because it has no fill or stroke. What I can do is I can give it a fill just to make it easier to see what I'm doing here. I can see that it's not in front of my image. So I can just check with my layers here. I can see this is here on its own layer. I'm going to move it here to content. And I'm going to take this shape and move it to content as well. And now I can see it's in front. So I'm going to actually, I don't know what I have on this layer here. So I'm going to move these to the content layer as well, and I'm going to delete this extra layer that's on top. And lock my guides. Then I'm going to select these two objects. Right click on it and make clipping mask. So that's something you've already done in this course, so it should be a bit of a review. Just make a clipping mask, so just clip it into that shape, and that allows me to work within this frame. I actually I still want a guide here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this shape, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to go back to this guide layer, and I'm going to paste it in place. Edit, paste in place. Any of those will do, so paste. And what I have here is you'll see that it pasted it onto the content layer, and that's because here I have this set to paste remembers layers. And that's not set by default. That's something that I did the last project I was working on. I set that, and that's why it's doing that. But if you're ever copying and pasting into a new file and you want to retain all your layer structure, that's one way to do it, is to go here to the hamburger icon and go paste remembers layers. I have this shape here now. This shape is just a rectangle, and I want to convert it to a guide. I'm going to right click and make guides. Okay, so now I'm going to take this type size that I chose, and as I move it, I'm holding down the Option key, and I'm just going to copy it over here. I'm going to move it to the front. And so this is something you may have already done in InDesign. Illustrator does it a lot more manually than InDesign does. So what you're going to do is you're going to, if you have set this as an area type object, then it will work great. Otherwise, if you set this as a line type object or a point type object, you can convert it here to convert to area type. So that converts it to point type. Can you convert it back to undo, convert it to area type. So One thing to notice here, when you're working with type, you can click anywhere on the type, and that selects the baseline. So here I know I've selected the type, and that allows me to apply attributes to it. I can change the tracking. I can also change the kerning. So I want to kern something in here. I don't recommend kerning an entire block of type, but I can change the space between them. I can change the size. I can change any of the attributes here. But what I want to do here is I actually want to work with this area type object a little bit differently. So instead of selecting everything, so the baselines are selected, I'm just going to select the edge of it. And I can do that if I can't see it and I have a hard time clicking on it. I can just switch to outline view, and that allows me to see where that is, because all I want to do is just select the edge. I want to select the box, the container. And you can see here I haven't, the baseline is not selected. And now what I want to do is I want to take my type tool, and here you can see, I just hit the P key to get my my pen tool, and I can click anywhere on here. I can add points just like I would to any other vector object in Illustrator. What I want to do first is I want to actually take this and I want to resize it to about here. And then what I want to do is I want to take part of this and change the shape. So what I want you to do is I want you to take any type, any object that you've close cropped, or you haven't, where it has if it's an object that has a clean background to it, and I want you to wrap the type around the image. And this, speaks directly to one way of combining type and image, which is to separate it. And I just want you to make sure that the type really flows with the image. And you may have to work with it a little bit, because you'll see what happens is that, you could actually switch it like this. You could actually change the alignment to align it left. That may be one way to do it. But I want you to make it so that this type is really wrapping around this object. And so just wait until you find something that you find interesting. I just want you to take the time to try working with this type object and change the position of things. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and save it. This shouldn't take very long. It's just, practicing working with it. And again, if you want to do just one, then that'll get you in a C range. If you want to do a couple of them, it can be with the same object, just change the orientation, just change it so that you're doing something quite different with it. You can just iterate on it, and that will give you more practice with the tools and improve your learning outcomes. And that'll move your grade up from a C to a B or an A. With the next one, I want to work with type, copying it into Photoshop. Just the vectors. So this one's a little more complicated, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go ahead and open Photoshop. And open this image that I found, and I just did a quick close crop of it. Actually opened in the wrong side here. Okay, I'll start with this one here. So what I want you to do is just just copy and paste the vectors into Photoshop. So you can delete those. And this is where I started. It's a photo by Max Reader from Unsplash. And I'm just looking for a profile shot that I could easily close crop. So So I'm calling this Fusion because it actually combines the image and the type together, the type and the image together. So here I'm going to go, what I'm going to start with is just find some letter forms that are really large. I want to work with some really big letters. So I'm going to actually work with her name. So Olivia, so this is the name of my prime. And I'm going to actually work with a typeface called Impact. It's one of the original Impact. It's one of the original core web fonts that were available for setting on the internet. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, and I'm going to set it really big. So I'm going to go, I'm going to actually rotate it. So I'm going to go take my selection tool. If I go near the edge of this type, the cursor changes to rotate it this way. And I'm scale it up really big. Scale this type as big as it will go. And start getting a little bit frustrated with working with a type object here. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a copy of this over here, and I'm going to actually convert this to outline. So I've showed you guys how to do this before. Convert, create outlines. So I'm going to create the outline. So as I've showed you before, this type object is made out of vectors, but it's actually the vectors are turned into typography, which allows us to do a lot of different things. It allows us to work easier with the keyboard, allows us to do a spell check. It makes your type accessible, so it actually is readable by a screen reader. Once you convert it to outlines, you can no longer do that. And you can do a lot in Illustrator without converting it to outlines. I just want to show you one thing that's pretty incredible that you can do. So over here under character, you can actually touch type tool. You can actually, if you use this touch type tool, you can actually select parts of your type and move them around. You can rotate them, so treat them as if they are like a type object. So you can scale them. You can take this little handle here and you can rotate it. And you know what? This is still type, so you can still spell check it. It's just incredible what they've done with this. So you can actually overlap them and create this kind of interesting kind of composition with your type, and it's still a type object. At a certain point, you're going to want to take this type and convert it to outlines. So I'm just going to take this, make another copy of it, because this is still a type object. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to go Object, Type, Create Outlines. So what this does now, if I go Command Y, you can see here that it has been converted to outlines. So this is now outlined. I can no longer use my keyboard to add characters, and I'm just going to resize it so it fits within my frame. I may or may not change that, but I'm going to start here. This is a vector type object. So when we started off the semester, one of the things that, and I'm just hitting Command Y to switch between outline and preview. One of the things that we talked about at the beginning of the semester is what is the difference between vector and raster. And one of the things that came up was, okay, vector is Illustrator, raster is Photoshop. Well, that is not true. I mean, yes, in some ways it is, but mostly it's not. So, and I just want to show you how you can actually work in raster format. And I'm not going to use all these characters because it's going to be too complicated. But I'm going to actually, I'm going to actually enlarge this and just take a couple of them. So I'm just going to take this, actually realign this here just to make it simpler. And you can do, just play around with it, have some fun. This is actually, I find this actually very interesting work. It's where the, kind of these skills that we've been working on through the whole course kind of come together in this complex space, which is where type and image come together. It's this complicated process that we go through. It's one of the harder things that we do as graphic designers, but one of the more interesting ones. So Command C to copy. I'm just going to take these two characters here, and you can see I'm in isolation mode. And I'm just going to delete that because I have a copy over there. I'm going to switch over to Photoshop, and I'm just going to Command paste. And so here I have some options. And later on in the course, we'll look at this smart object idea. What I want you to do is actually paste it as a path. So you can go OK and paste it as a path. And what Photoshop has done is it has immediately tried to put it into a different type of mask, which is a vector mask. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to switch over here to paths. And here you can see that this is stuff that I've pasted in here previously. I'm just going to work with this one here. No, I'm actually going to delete it. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to start from scratch here. Delete and delete. And I'm going to go ahead and paste this object here. So, and again, it's pasting it as a layer. So, okay, what I'm going to do here is, in order to simplify this, actually create a new layer. Okay. Delete. And now I'm going to paste a path. So as soon as you paste a path, Photoshop tries to make it into this special kind of a mask, which is a vector mask. We're not going to do that this time, but we may look at that later in the course. It is actually a very useful type of mask for in specific cases. But right now what I want to do is I want to actually just pay attention to this here, this path that we pasted here. And paths are not saved until you actually give them a name. So here, this is a vector mask, so it's saved, but I actually want to save it as the two characters that are embedded in there, which is the O and the I. And I'm going to delete this layer here. So we're going to create a new type of layer. With your paths saved there, these here, you can treat them as you would other objects in Photoshop. So if I take this move tool, I can grab them and move them around. Oh, just select it first. Grab them and move them around. I'm going to use this other tool here to move them actually. So using your vector editing tools, you can do some of the same things you would do in Illustrator. So I'm going to go Command T to activate the transform function. And I'm going to scale this right up. And here you can see an inconsistency between Illustrator and Photoshop. Is that in Illustrator, if I hold my Shift key down, it constrains it. In Photoshop, it's the opposite by default. You can change it. I haven't, just because that's the way Illustrator is doing it by default. I mean, Photoshop is doing it by default. But it doesn't constrain it if you hold your Shift key down. So you have to not hold your Shift key down in order to constrain it. So I'm just going to resize this to here, hit enter, and then I'm going to go back to my layer palette, and I'm going to create this new type of special layer, which is called a fill layer. So I'm going to go new fill layer, solid color, and I'm just going to choose a really bright color. So I'm going to call this okay, and I'm going to fill this. I'm just going to double click here. And I'm going to fill it with a bright color. Okay. So here you can see on the layers, so I switched over between layers and paths. So I have this layer here that is filled with a solid color, but has this mask around it. You can't see the mask because it's actually this vector shape. So we're actually working with vectors in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find some part of the image that I kind of want to highlight with the counter in the O. And from this point on, you can do whatever you want. If you're working with if you're working with a face, an image of a face, you're welcome to do this kind of exercise that I'm doing here. If you have a hand that's going through a counter, that's great too. I just want you to find a way to integrate your image and your type using vectors in Photoshop. So I'm gonna multiply this together just to combine them in a way that I can see it. And then I'm gonna do just something very simple. So here I have this mask that was already made. I'm gonna actually duplicate this shape, duplicate this layer, move it on top. And all I'm gonna do now is I am gonna hide part of the image so that this shows back through. And because this is a vector, it's actually very easy to combine them together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hide part of this image. I'm gonna edit the mask. I have a copy of the mask here, so I'm not worried about losing that information. But if I wanna work completely non-destructively, I'm gonna group it, and I'm gonna make a new mask on this group layer. So here there's a little folder that I made, that's the group. And then I'm just gonna take my brush tool. Brush tool. My brush is very small. I'm going to make it larger. I want a good hard brush here, and I'm just going to paint over top here like this. So I'm going to do this top part here. So all that's doing is creating this illusion that this O is wrapping around the head of my subject. It's a very simple. You can see it just took a few seconds to do it. Once I got my path thing all organized, it did not take very long. I'm actually going to switch back to this tool here, and I'm going to take this and make one modification to this. I'm going to take this here, and I'm going to drag it down over top of the image here. And I'm going to actually edit this some more so that this comes over top. And it gives this illusion that it's the figure's coming in and out from between here. So I'm going to modify this some more. Take my brush tool again, and I'm just going to paint this here. So all that's doing is revealing what's behind, right? So again, completely non-destructive. This vector mask is actually sitting on top of the original image. It's multiplied together, and all I did was I'd create a copy of this over top and hide part of it, and it creates this illusion of the image interacting with the type. I'm just gonna save this, and if I want to actually, I could actually separate these two, so I could actually duplicate this layer. Take this part here, delete it. Take this part here, delete it. And now I have two shapes. I have this shape and this shape, and I can actually, if I double click on it, I can actually change the color of the second part. So very flexible. There's lots of stuff I can do with it. This is totally editable. So if I take this arrow tool, I can actually take part of this and I can modify it just like I would any other vector. And that's hiding part of it because of my mask here on top. But very powerful way of working. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And again, once you have this set up, you can do lots of different versions, and that'll give you practice, improve your learning outcomes, and increase your grade. All I want you to do from here now is to place this image, and you can actually place the Photoshop file directly in here. Define this image first. Oh, that's not in here. It's in, where did I save this? Yes, it's in the right folder. Okay, so all I have to do is place it. It's in the latest exercise folder, type Fusion 2. This one, yes. You can see here that it's quite a bit larger than the square again. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up here, and with the constrain maintaining the width and the height proportions. I'm going to actually, I remember what it was 26p6. I'm going to place it like that. Okay. And here's where I want you to pay attention to something very interesting that happened here. And it's this thing that we talked about before with color space. So I'm going to show you how to correct it, because if you look here at my image here, you'll see that this image here is RGB. And this image here is now in a CMYK color space. So it's taken this really wide color space and constricted it into a smaller space. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I am going to convert my color to RGB. You can see right away it brightens up. So that's what I want you to make sure that you pay attention to colors when you're doing this, all the things that we've learned throughout the course. And I'm going to save this and have some fun. So again, once you have this set up, you can do multiple iterations. You don't have to come up with a new image and new type and new pieces. Just play around with it and increase your achievement of the learning outcomes, and at the same time improve your grade, right? So the grade is, I believe that my grading is totally valid in this case, because what I'm doing is I'm aligning your grade with your achievement of learning outcomes. And if you look at the rubrics that I put in there, this idea of mastery is where I want everybody to land. You can rise above that and go to and get it to an exemplary level, which is an A+. So from here, you're just going to save a copy. So this is part of the process for your poster. So this is not, a totally separate exercise. I just want to doing this exercise to focus on learning how to use the type tools and working in combining type and image. And so you're going to save it, a copy, as a PDF. And here it's very important that you optimize it. If you do not optimize this image, you will not be able to upload it to Miro with any sort of efficiency. I've heard some of you already complain about your Miro boards are not loading properly, and it's because you're not optimizing your images. So go ahead and save. And here you can use the GD157 submission. If you find the image is still too large, you can actually reduce this to 150. And just make sure that you leave the image quality as high so I can see what you did. And go ahead and save it. And you're going to upload this to weekly content, typesetting, right here. And again, I want you to take a minute to just write 1 or 2 sentences describing what you learned. So this gets added into your grade. So it's, again, a very valid way to grade your work, because if you're reflecting on what you've done, that means that you're learning it a little bit better. It all adds up. So here I'm going to take this here, upload, and here under write submission, just a couple of sentences saying what I learned, or what was frustrating. So this is I hope this is I hope you find that these exercises contribute towards your hidden career your hidden career poster. And yeah, let me know how it goes. I'll see you on the next one.